Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability. This is a podcast dedicated to putting the human back into humanity, and we are now boosted by Humans First. I'm grateful to have Humans First founder Mike Vacanti with me, and an awesome human putting a lot of human back into humanity in Roz Savage, who is a Guinness World Book record holding amazing ocean rower. And I'd love you to explore that and share that with us a little bit with the audience. Author of a new book called The Gifts of Solitude, and also founder of The Sisters. So welcome to the podcast, Roz.
Oh, my pleasure to be speaking with you again, Gary.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. Thank you. Would you mind for our audience just maybe giving us a little bit of an update and a lowdown as to, who is Roz? How did you come into being with regards to writing the books Gifts of Solitude? Because I think it really does sound like a book for our time.
When you asked me how I came into being, I thought you had to take that up with my mother.
That was not solitude, was it?
Let's not go there. Nobody needs to think about their parents creating them. Although we are all human. It is where all humans and all other creatures start. Okay, let's be professional here. On with the show. So, how did I come to be here talking about Gifts of Solitude? Well, Gary, as you mentioned, I have rowed an ocean or three, having started out very conventionally, management consultant for 11 years, very ordinary kind of life, belatedly realised that the lifestyle that was supposed to make me happy was not in fact making me happy. So I quit my job and set about finding out what I really wanted to do when I grew up. Had an environmental awakening, desperately wanted to do something to raise awareness of our environmental issues. Obviously for the sake of all species on the planet, but I am particularly fond of humans. And this crazy idea just came to me one day like a call to adventure. I had rowed before, and I think that was enough to give me the delusion that this strange and rather masochistic sport of rowing alone across oceans was something that I was vaguely qualified to do. And it seemed that this could be potentially sufficiently attention-getting that I could use my blog posts and my talks and my books and videos and so on to get across my environmental message. So that's what I spent 7 years doing, not continuously, although it sometimes felt like it, several months at a time, rowing across the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans between 2005 and 2011. Wow. And so, yeah, here I am still trying to make the world a better place in some way. And given what's been happening recently with this little virus that you might have heard about, I was trying to think, how could I be helpful in this context, not being medically trained or really having anything to contribute in a direct way. And then it just occurred to me that a lot of people are not used to spending lots of time on their own and are now being forced to. And probably there are lots of people who were wishing that they had more time on their own if they've got all the kids home from school. But this book that I felt inspired to write, The Gifts of Solitude, was really directed towards the people who are spending time alone. And from my own personal experience, when I did my first ocean, the Atlantic, I found it incredibly hard. Those little voices in my head gave me a really, really tough time. I had a lot of growing and maturing to do. It really was sort of a baptism of fire in a very watery way. So the book is about surviving and thriving in solitude. So the surviving part is really my reflections from the Atlantic on the coping strategies that I discovered haphazardly as I went along out of sheer necessity on that ocean, so as not to drive myself completely insane before I reached the other side. But then actually on the subsequent oceans, the Pacific and the Indian, that was more about the thriving in solitude, where I really learned to appreciate the opportunities, the gifts, the chance to really get to know myself better and develop some self-compassion and really connect with my sense of purpose. And I even towards the end of the book get a little bit spiritual about it, inspired by some wonderful conversations. I also interviewed some people for the book, including the wonderful Tenzin Palmo, who is a British Buddhist nun who had some wonderful words of wisdom. So that was probably a slightly longer answer than I intended, but I hope it answers the question.
Oh, it's just wonderful depth for me, and I, what a journey of continued inspiration, and how you frame it into your personal discovery is really brilliant. I mean, that depth of insight and discovery internally is very remarkable and intriguing.
Well, I feel like everything I've learned in my life, I've learned by doing it the wrong way first. Or, well, maybe I shouldn't say wrong way, but, by doing it the suboptimal way first. And then, like I say, kind of stumbling out of necessity across some better ways of framing things. And especially what I think is relevant at the moment is that there is something very humbling about rowing across an ocean. It really brought home to me how little control I had over what was going on. I could try to control the wind and the waves and the currents, and I 100% of the time never succeeded. So there was a lot of surrender to what is. There was a need to refocus on the things that I could control, like just showing up and sticking my oars in the water for 12 hours a day. That was my job. And also finding ways to reframe the situation. I couldn't change the reality, as none of us can change this coronavirus situation that we're in right now. When we can't change that, we just have to change our attitude to it. And actually, that makes all the difference. And I was so inspired in this by Viktor Frankl and his beautiful little book, Man's Search for Meaning. And really, when you read about somebody enduring the horrors of the Auschwitz concentration camp in World War II, you never have any right to complain about anything ever again, because that is just as bad as it gets. But the way that he found to maintain dignity, to help his fellow prisoners, to maintain his psychological hygiene, as he called it, this clarity and beauty of his thoughts, even despite all the ugliness and the brutality that surrounded him. It's just such a timeless and inspiring story. So that's been a really big influence on me. And I think just, his main mantra was, when you can't change what's happening around you, then the last power left to us is to choose our attitude.
It's so stunning, Roz. What comes up for me straight away is that word surrender, I think, is such a powerful word, that ability to let go. I think there's a lot of people listening to us right now, myself included as we speak, is what are the things that we want to let go of as we emerge from this gift of solitude that we're experiencing right now? And that comes with some accountability. And also what I love is your innate desire to experiment on that journey. You're crossing an ocean, you don't know what's coming, but you're still sort of curious about, almost like playful, it feels like, to some extent, certainly on the second two trips.
Yeah, I really like that you use the word playful and curious as well, because I think that curiosity is a beautiful mindset to get into, because it would be very easy to get frustrated. I expect a lot of people listening to this have struggled or have suffered financially as a result of all of this. I know I have, because most of my income comes from speaking at conferences, and clearly all of that went away almost overnight. And at first, I found that really hard. It really, like, that fundamental Maslow's hierarchy, root chakra kind of instability of having your basic needs suddenly not met. Like, how am I going to pay the rent? And, you know, kind of staring into the abyss. And it took me a few days to get out of that initial funk and go, okay, well, it's time to get curious, to get resourceful, to look for the gift in this. Yeah, I can get frustrated, I could get depressed, I could get angry, but that's really not going to be very constructive here. So what can I control in this? You know, I can't make those conferences happen. I've got to find something else that I can do. So let's get curious about this. Life has tended to take good care of me in the past. So if I choose to believe that there's a gift here, that heck, maybe I needed to pivot away from conference speaking anyway. It's very bad for my carbon footprint. It's always a bumpy income stream. So what else do I love to do that could actually be useful here? So that was another strand of thought that helped to inspire the book. And I think that as we start to emerge, I feel like as we leave lockdown, we're going to be like these little moles kind of popping up out of our holes and emerging, blinking into the sunlight. It has felt over the last weeks and even months a bit like reality has been suspended. I don't know about you, but time has done really weird, stretchy things, and then sometimes compressing things. It's all been quite strange. And as we emerge from that, wondering what the future's going to look like, economically, logistically, politically, socially, like what's it going to feel like when we're allowed to hug people again? Are we still going to be kind of standoffish and a bit nervous around them? I'm so curious about what's going to happen next. And of course, trying to nudge it a little bit towards the positive things that might come out of this. So I think that part of the beauty of curiosity is that it helps us to be less attached to any particular outcome. I feel like with my financial wobbliness, it's like the ego mind freaks out when things are really uncertain, because it likes certainty, it likes to know what's going on, it likes coherence, it doesn't like change. It throws a complete, like 2-year-old temper tantrum when things are not going its way. But when we can switch into that attitude of openness and curiosity and wonder, I wonder what's going to happen next, then it's not like we're setting up expectations that will then lead to disappointment if we don't get what we thought we wanted. But if we're just going, what an interesting experiment. And to come back to your word playful, yeah, how do we play with this? We're all in uncharted waters here. Nobody has got a roadmap for what happens next. Clearly our leaders don't, or most leaders don't. I shouldn't tar them all with the same brush. Some have been doing a really amazing job. So how do we sort of stay connected with our values? And this is actually why I think it's important, while we still have maybe a few more days or a few weeks of before we're really launched back into the busyness and the hurly-burly of normality, to think about what do we want to carry forward? Which pieces of luggage can we put down and leave behind? What are the values that we want to really embody going forwards, both individually and collectively? And these are sort of things that I've been thinking about while we've been on lockdown. And I hope some other people have taken the time to think about these things as well, rather than just catching up with every boxed set that ever was. Although that's fine too, you know, no judgment, you know, whatever gets you through the lockdown. How have you been spending lockdown, Gary? How's that been for you?
Like you, really, Roz. So no, thank you for the question. I empathise deeply, really deeply, with what's going on and the loss of life and the challenges, but I cannot
Mm,
help but see the hope and the opportunity for reset and connectivity
yeah.
and full global systemic healing. Valuing our key workers,
Yes.
redistributing wealth to where it's needed and not just being stuck in the upper echelons. There's so much education going online in a week, so we don't all, just so many belief systems were shattered overnight, Roz, and the ability to.
About what is and what isn't possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that's where I'm curious: is that what will we leave and what will we take with us? What do you think, Mike?
Well, I love that, and I was listening so intently, Roz, as you were walking through that, right? Because your awareness of making those selections is so deep, and it's beyond what is normal, because you've explored that, in your work and in your journeys, like literal journeys. And so for me, it was I was really sinking into that awareness and your ability to find that curiosity and have the strength of choice, rather than just becoming subservient to the ego and going in and saying, how can I fix this? How can I grasp for the illusion of control again? Control being that illusion, right? It's
Mm.
and I was thinking of you being in the boat, and not with sails but with oars. you,
Yeah,
you
the
did say
idiot's way of
rowing,
crossing an ocean. Yes.
right?
I know, why couldn't I just stuck up a sail and kicked back in a hammock with a bottle of rum? That would have been a much better way to do it.
And I think of that, that there isn't any fixing of those conditions. And so that surrender, as you were talking about, the power of that. But taking that in the current context of what we're experiencing now, the surrendering to it is leaving behind the notion of trying to fix everything, because it will be an illusion or it will be temporary. And how do we gain that view and that awareness and that perspective that we can come out with more than what we've left behind if we make that choice? And that more is exactly what you were talking about. How do we center on our values? How do we center on that vision of how it can be? And so there's this dreaming that opens up again, because we don't have to drag the past with us and say, I want to go back to what was normal, whether it be good or bad. And I think it's fair to say there was plenty of what used to be normal wasn't definitely positive. And
Indeed, yeah, or sustainable.
right, right.
Yeah.
And so
I
I
just want
found
to
myself
comment.
in like a
Yeah.
reflective journey as you were talking.
I just want to comment for the people who are listening to this that Mike is wearing a t-shirt that says "We can do better," which is just so appropriate. And something that I've really been thinking about a lot during this time has been resilience on many different levels, because I'm pretty certain that the coronavirus is not going to be the last shock to our global system that we experience in our lifetimes. And I don't know what the next one's going to be. It could be another virus, but maybe it's going to be something from climate change. Or, I mean, human beings are really, really bad at predicting the future, clearly. But how can we build resilience, like our emotional, spiritual resilience individually? Also very practical things like supply chain resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean stashing 10,000 cans of baked beans in your basement. I'm talking about maybe growing more of our own vegetables closer to home, or growing our own toilet paper, maybe. But, I think that we could, we do have a tendency as a species to close the stable door just after a very specific horse has bolted. And maybe we should be looking more broadly at how do we reduce the risks but increase personal resilience, logistical resilience, and also economic resilience. One of the things I'm exploring with the sisters is complementary currencies, because people who have thought deeply about these things look at our global monoculture of currencies. Even though we have different currencies, they're all locked into the same system. And we're seeing now the shortcomings of that. And also coming back to Gary's point about the key workers that we've seen, the people who have been the heroes during this time, not just the medical professionals, but also the delivery drivers and the shelf stackers and the checkout people in the supermarkets, who've really kept society functioning. And yet a lot of them are on minimum wages. And it does, I'm curious about how the, not just the more abstract values, but the financial values that we put on things might get shaken up going forwards. And I hope that we do take these opportunities. I hope we don't just go back to the same old, because that would be a tragic waste of an opportunity for exploration and growth. And it does take a certain amount of courage, I think, to have that openness and curiosity. Clearly, there's been a lot of fear going on recently, and I'm hoping that surviving through this time will maybe make people less fearful about fear, if that makes sense. To know that, I mean, I know that this is something that rowing across oceans did for me, was to look back on experiences that were really hard, that challenged me every single day, that pushed me way outside of my comfort zone, but to know that I survived them and I actually learned from them, gave me so much more confidence that I could face future challenges. So I really hope that might be something that comes out of this. I'd be curious to know what you think about that, Mike.
I just love Roz. I just have to say thank you for. I love observing your exploration, like real time. It's a beautiful thing to behold, human curiosity, just the mind wandering, like really exploring that in real time. It's so impressive to see, and I can see why you got through the 3 crossings of those oceans that you did, because I think there's a real lesson for me and for all of us listening in this, that being okay, talk about vulnerability, being okay with not knowing is actually part of the solution, I think. Is actually
well said.
Being okay with that. Like, actually, it's the journey, and Mike speaks about this in his book, Believership, is it's about who you become on the journey. It's not about the end that you reach, because that end is always moving anyway. Like, I'm the one that burnt myself out because I was striving for the house, the money, the next job title, and it's never enough. So at what point does that become enough? It never does. So like, being okay with the journey, I think, is, without trying to sound too lackadaisical, I genuinely believe that's part of this, I think, Roz.
Sort of the whole point, isn't it? It's the point of living is to be on that journey and to be exploring. And I hope that I carry on exploring till, well, I was going to say till the day I die, although I hope I get to do a bit more exploring after that. I mean, depending on your spiritual worldview. Because I think as soon as we think that we know it all, our growth just stops. And to me, it's really all about growing. It's all about evolving. And there's always room for improvement. There's always some mental model that we had, and maybe that we've held dear for a long time, and then something comes along that we go, oh, I hadn't thought of things that way before. And rather than getting dogmatic about it and shutting it out because it doesn't resonate with what we thought was true, if we're able to hold maybe two contradictory points of view for a while. And again, coming back to your theme of playfulness, Gary, I just sort of play with both of those. I call it as ifery. You know, I behave as if this new idea were true. And I see if the world makes more sense or less sense. I see if I feel happier or less happy. And if it seems like the new belief actually serves me or the world better in some way, then I go, okay, well, let's go with that one then. And I'm ready to put down and leave behind the mental model that I held before.
I'm going to propose a business to you. I would like to collaborate and build a consulting firm called Asifery. That might be my new favorite word, Roz.
Oh, thank you. I made it up. Yes. Well, it's a fun way to approach life, and I suppose. You know, I think that if I like the phrase strong opinions lightly held, because I think it is important to have beliefs, but also to know that we choose those beliefs and not to mistake beliefs for actual truth.
I love that. And you I think presented that so well when we talk about know-it-all, right? Because there's a flawed belief in that in itself, right? Is I know it all is, it's a bizarre thought, much less a statement. And oftentimes I think we mistake knowledge for I've formed an opinion.
Yes.
And forming an opinion isn't necessarily knowledge.
This is true. Yeah.
And we mistake that, and then we set out to prove that opinion rather than improve our vision or our understanding. And that's why asifery is such a brilliant thing, because we're looking to improve rather than prove. We're exploring knowledge rather than forming an opinion. And so then when you finish it, Roz, with holding that lightly, and there's still openness to explore. Oh, I mean, that is such wisdom to sit in and share and explore. And again, I'm just so taken back because I think of you, your ability to be creative within yourself, right? And healthy in exploring all of those thoughts because of that solitude, which is, what you've just written about. And, I just get so much clarity about the strength of your mental state to navigate through that. I'm just really enjoying that.
Well, I really like your play on words with the prove and the improve. I think that's great. We can agree. You can have my asifery if I can have your prove and improve.
That's a fair trade.
And I think, in these recent times of great division, if we could have that greater flexibility and that willingness to consider different points of view, I think, unfortunately, for a long time, we've lived in a culture that is impressed with knowledge, with opinionated people, with dogmatic people. And there's maybe something else I've been thinking about a lot recently is like the yin and the yang, the feminine and the masculine. And this is not really about gender, because clearly we all are a blend of masculine and feminine. And I do think there's a different kind of, hesitate to use the word leadership, or maybe leadership and self-leadership as well, that has more of that receptive, that more of a, okay, I'm going to use Rianne Eisler's language here, of partnership rather than domination. Because I do think that there has been maybe too much admiration for the really strong person who will seek to impose their views on other people. And they will sort of bang you over the head with their opinion until you just submit. which isn't necessarily the way to find the highest truth or the greatest wisdom in a situation.
Right.
So maybe it's time that we gave less attention to the dogmatic people and explored together, like in a softer kind of a way. Again, not I love that phrase about having an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. Clearly, like we need to have a little bit of backbone here, and to have views and not just go, oh yeah, you're right. But actually to collaborate together to see how, by combining my view with your view, we actually arrive at a better truth or a higher form of wisdom together. And I'm fascinated, like, how could that ever translate into the political scenes in the US or in the UK, or I'm sure there are other countries in the world. Those are just the two most present ones for me right now, where there does seem to have been, like, if one side says it's black, the other side is going to say it's white. There's been this dogma of opposition.
It's
and
so interesting because
not what's going to save us.
Yeah, and I don't jump into that political conversation because of that reason, because I don't think it's productive. However, as you've just framed it, it's really interesting because the sides of conflict are much more interested in perpetuating the conflict than in solving the problem. So to give an illustration, my view of it, and this is American politics, current state. If the government or politics were a tennis match,
Mm-hmm.
and we each had a player that we were rooting for, the whole energy has gone to painting our face a certain color and screaming at the other side, not even cheering for the tennis player anymore, but just yelling at the other side that has their faces painted differently.
Yeah.
And we've gotten so noisy and so focused about that the players have actually stopped playing tennis. There's not even a real game going on anymore, and people are just screaming at the other side without any meaningful activity taking place on the court. We've lost our purpose.
That is a great image. Yes. Well, maybe things are reaching enough of maybe what's happening right now is that things are reaching this kind of crescendo, and there's going to be a certain bursting of the bubble, which could well be a bit of a traumatic process. I think when we look at human history, we see that we're generally not very good at changing things proactively. We tend to let things get really bad until they sort of explode or implode, and then go, oh, that was a bit messy. Maybe we need to find a better way to do this. But if that's what it takes, I would be so interested to be catching up with you guys this time next year, and maybe listening to this again first, and just reflecting on, please, like, what has changed. I would be so depressed if we're here a year from now going, oh, well, nothing really changed at all.
Gary, can I ask a question about the book? May I?
Please do.
So, Roz, you this compelled you to write, and what really stuck with me is you've written a couple of books, and so you have that down, and that's a skill. And you were saying, where do I focus my intention to make an impact on the current state, which means that you, in a very rapid fashion, put this book together, and what an incredible talent that is to be able to.
Have you read it yet?
Oh, well,
I mean, actually,
I've been through the process once, so I know that it's not simple.
I think it helped that I had, over the winter, been working on a doctoral dissertation that was really looking back over the last 15 years of my life, from the ocean rowing and all of the work that I've done since. So I was actually already very in touch with my own reflections on my experiences. And so when I realized that I had something potentially useful to offer in the current situation, and by chance listening to a podcast with a science fiction writer called Hugh Howey, who self-publishes on Amazon, I just went, oh, I could actually write a book. And, you know, conventional publishing, there's such a massively long lead time on it. But I just realized I could actually do something here. Yeah. So I just pounded out a first draft in 17 days. And then got 6 or 7 people to read it and give me feedback, and culled a few chapters and made a few changes. And there we are, because it felt that it needed to be timely in order to be useful. And I'll probably do a second edition post-coronavirus. And something that I do enjoy sharing the things that I have found by trial and error have really worked for me, because I think the deeper that we go individually, the more universal our experience becomes. So I really hope that people find this useful. It's meant to be very practical, very down to earth, hopefully a little bit funny in places. You know, life is too serious to be taken seriously. And I also interviewed some wonderful people for it, as well as Tenzin Palmo, the Buddhist nun. I also spoke to a researcher at the University of California who has proven at the epigenetic level how acts of altruism and connecting with community not only helps us to get over loneliness, but is actually good for our health and boosts our immunity to viruses. So it seems like a really good time to get on board with that research. And I spoke to a polar explorer who did his expeditions solo, and also a therapist or a psychotherapist who specializes in running death cafes, and has done an enormous amount of research around death and dying. And what she had to share about that was actually very reassuring. And I hope that if people have lost loved ones during this time, that they might take some comfort from what Sue Brain had to say about it. So it was a wonderful opportunity to draw on these other sources of expertise and wisdom around this issue of solitude and other aspects of this recent shared experience. Because really, what a privilege for so many humans around the world to have had a shared experience like this.
That perspective. I'm having so much fun. This has been such a wonderful hour. You're extraordinary in what you've accomplished and what you're able to do. And the invite to bring us all in so closely and share that in a common experience is so brilliant, Roz. What a gift you're sharing. What a gift.
It really is though, Roz. And I think, like, you've given, I was going to ask you the question, what would your invitation be to anybody that's listening to us, like through reading the book? What's your hope for them? You've sort of answered it, but I'd love to leave that question there for you. You know, if someone's listening to us now, as we start to wrap up, Roz, what are your hopes for someone that might listen to us and go, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Like, what do you hope they may see in themselves within your book, or what's your hope for them after reading it?
Well, in the short term, I really hope it cheers them up and gives them a few coping strategies for getting through this. But like my highest aspiration would be that they actually come to appreciate this opportunity for some time out from the day-to-day busyness and the constant bombardment and distraction that seems to have become such a feature of 21st century life. I think that our brains haven't yet adapted to the massive amounts of information that are just lobbed at us every single day. We do benefit enormously. Even the most radical extroverts out there, I think we all benefit from a bit of time with ourselves. And for me personally, when I set out rowing, I was a pretty insecure person with not a great sense of self-esteem. And for me, I would say the biggest gift that I've had from solitude is that chance to get to know myself. And, you know, I've managed to fix a few things by finding better ways of doing them. And there are some things that I haven't managed to fix that I've just accepted about myself that are maybe not how I wish they were, but on balance, I feel like I'm okay. And when I give my talks, I have sometimes had people come up to me afterwards to say, oh, I don't know how you could do what you did. And they're not really talking about the physical side. They're saying, I couldn't stand to be alone with myself for that long. And if somebody feels that way, I would be very surprised if they're not a person well worth getting to know. I would want to get to know them, and I wish for their sake that they would want to get to know themselves, because I think when we can accept who we are with all our flaws and our quirks and our foibles, we could go, well, I'm not perfect, but you know, I'd be a little bit annoying if I was completely perfect. But actually, you know, I'm okay. I'm pretty okay, and I actually quite like myself. And I think most of us, I think probably all of us could get to that place. But it does take a bit of time and a bit of reflection and a bit of solitude. So that would be my wish.
I'm buzzing. I'm literally buzzing as you share that. And I just think that invitation that you're already enough and just see back towards that, I think is so powerful, Roz.
Yeah, and it's true of everybody. And I think not just for ourselves, and it is wonderful to just feel comfortable in your own skin, but also wouldn't the world be a different place if we were all comfortable in our own skins and we didn't feel the need to project our stuff onto other people or to dominate other people? Can you imagine an entire parliament or congress or whatever full of politicians who just actually like themselves? I think it would be such a different place. That is the kind of world that I would like to live in.
That's so powerful. And all of those measures, right? I take that as an invitation to truly explore what we measure and what we value. That it's more than a concept. It's actually a possibility of choice that we can make. And I just love that invitation. Thank you for that.
Stunning.
You're welcome.
Stunning. How can people find you, Roz? I really want people to find the book, and they want to find you. Like, everyone needs Roz either indirectly or virtually in their world. So what's the best way to get you?
Thank you, Gary. You're so great at reminding me of the practicalities here. Everything is linked from my personal website, which is rozsavage.com. Roz is R-O-Z or R-O-Z, depending on where in the world you are. And then I set up a website specifically for the book as well, which is thegiftsofsolitude.com. And that's got a link to the book. I've also done a whole series of little videos. They nearly always come out at between 6 minutes and 6.5. I don't run a clock. That just seems to be my natural span. So I've done little videos that start out based on a chapter of the book, but then I just riff on the theme and I say I put in bonus material, it just means I go off on tangents and sort of expand on the topic. So it would be great to have people, and those are available either as a video on YouTube or as audio only. But it's all linked from thegiftsofsolitude.com. So I would, and the book also, so, you know, it's a light, quick read. It's, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours depending on your reading speed. It's meant to be fun. It's not meant to be a heavy lift because we've all got enough going on. So I hope that you will find it uplifting and inspiring, and if you have a few laughs at it as well, then that would make me very happy too.
Wow. Roz, thank you so much for joining Mike and I today. It's been, I knew it'd be amazing, but you just go up a notch every time. So thank you for bringing your inspiration and your insights, and I will make sure those details are in the show notes, and please keep in touch.
I will. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Gary.
It's wonderful. And we will come back and get you in 12 months' time. We've taken that as an invitation. So thank you, Roz.
Yes.
Deal.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much.